In simple terms, Purvis Short could flat out score the ball, even being a top 5 scorer in the league multiple times with a great jump shot and a constant mismatch on the floor, standing at 6'7" with the ability to play shooting guard, small forward, and power forward, but never managed to get the All-Star nod he deserved because of the lack of team success. This is a look back on Purvis Short's career. Purvis Short would grow up in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, playing basketball with his older brother Gene Short, who also became an NBA player. But Short would attend Blair Center Hattiesburg High School, where he would dominate, showing off his elite ability to score while being a good defender, and also developing his patented jump shot along the way that was extremely high-arching like a rainbow for a shot, eventually going on to earn himself the nickname the Rainbowman. Now, Purvis Short would lead his high school team to a state championship, becoming an extremely sought-after prospect, allegedly even being recruited by 150 different schools. But upon his graduation, it was clear where he wanted to go, and to the surprise of the outside world, he would decide to go to Jackson State to follow in his older brother's footsteps, where Short would only continue his dominance, seeing himself become a 2-time SWAC Player of the Year. And by his senior year, Purvis Short was averaging 29.5 points and 11.4 rebounds a game, seeing himself go on to become Jackson State's all-time leading scorer while garnering interest from the NBA. Now, Purvis Short would go on to get selected by the Golden State Warriors with the 5th overall pick in the 1978 NBA draft. Unfortunately for Short, though, he will always be compared to the player taken 1 pick after him in Larry Bird, but Short would still find himself carving out a great career. Short would find himself joining a Warriors-led team by Phil Smith and Hall of Famer Robert Parrish. Now, Purvis, his rookie year, would find himself in the rotation as the 7th man with 22.7 minutes a night, where he would average 10.6 points, 4.6 rebounds, and 1.3 assists. The Warriors this season were trying to find a new identity, as this was the first season without Rick Barry on the team, who left as a free agent in off-season. With this, the Warriors would struggle, going 38-44, missing the NBA playoffs. Now, next season would come around and Short would continue to improve, henceforth getting an increase in minutes this season, becoming a starter. With more time on the floor, Short would fit in doing what he was brought to Golden State to do, and score. He would be tied for first on the team in points per game at 17, while also averaging 5.1 rebounds and 2 assists a night. Now, despite personal success and growth, the team would end up struggling, getting bit by the injury bug, seeing Phil Smith and Purvis Short have to miss time this year, resulting in the Warriors going 24-58, missing the playoffs. After the poor season, Golden State decided it was time to shake up the roster. Now, the Warriors would decide to do a ginormous trade right before the draft. The Warriors would trade Robert Parrish with a first-round draft pick that would end up being Kevin McHale to the Boston Celtics for a first-round draft pick that would end up being Ricky Brown and the first overall pick in the NBA draft, Joe Barry Carroll, which in hindsight would go down as one of the worst trades in franchise history, and sending 2 future Hall of Famers. But hey, at least it wasn't that horrible, with Carroll going on to be an all-star caliber player, I guess. Now, the Warriors would also trade away Phil Smith this offseason for World B. Free, who was an all-star the year prior. And the Warriors still weren't done with the overhaul in trading for future Hall of Famer Bernard King. With the addition of King, Purvis Short's role would change, but he would still find himself playing similar minutes as the prior years, but with a smaller role in the offense as a whole. So Purvis Short on the season would average 16.1 points, 3.2 assists, and 4.9 rebounds. Now, after all the moves and Short's transition to a new role within the Warriors, they would improve, but not as much as they had hoped, missing the playoffs, going 39-43. Now, next season, Purvis Short would find himself coming off the bench in order to create more floor space and touches for King and Free. Now, Purvis Short would embrace his new role rather well, averaging 14.4 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 2.8 assists a night. And the Warriors would improve yet again because of these changes, going 45-37. Yet, it still wasn't enough to make the NBA playoffs. After missing out in the playoffs again, the Warriors would decide to shake up the roster again. Now, the Warriors would trade Bernard King to the New York Knicks for Michael Ray Richardson, and early into the season, the Warriors would continue to shake up things, trading away World B. Free to the Cavs, and hoping to free up shot attempts for the team. And on top of this, not long after, with Michael Ray Richardson's experience not really going well, they would end up trading him away for Sleepy Floyd, helping the team long-term, but not necessarily short in the immediate year. With non-stop changing, Purvis Short would find himself back into the starting lineup, increasing his averages to 21.4 points, 3.4 assists, and 5.3 rebounds. Now, Short was officially the second option on the team behind Joe Barry Carroll. However, with all the roster turnover and Short missing a couple games, the Warriors would take a big step back this year, going 30-52, missing the playoffs. Next season, the Warriors would remain similar to the end of the prior year in terms of their roster, but would make improvements with Sleepy Floyd becoming a key player on top of Short becoming more of a focal point in the offense. Purvis Short was officially the main guy on the team and would go on to average 22.8 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 3.1 assists. And the Warriors had improved this year because of it, going 37-45, but still not good enough to make the playoffs. Yet again though, when things seemed to be going in the right direction, things would go wrong with Joe Barry Carroll and the Warriors, and they were having a big old contract dispute on a new deal. And Joe Barry Carroll, to the surprise of the whole entire league, would go overseas next year to play. Now this meant for the next season, the whole entire offense was going to be run through Purvis Short, and he was more than ready to embrace the role. Purvis Short would go on to average the fourth most points in the entire NBA that season at 28 per game, to go along with 3 assists and 5.1 rebounds, yet would miss out in the All-Star selection primarily because his numbers were deemed to be inflated with him being on a bad team. But man, I still think with those numbers he should have deserved a shot and the nod to be an All-Star. This phenomenal season by Short would also see himself have a career game that most would dream of. During a November 17th game against the New Jersey Nets, Short would score a career-high 59 points, going 20 for 28 from the floor, which at the time only 9 other players all-time had scored more points in a game. But as mentioned prior, despite all the personal success, the Warriors without Joe Barry Carroll would struggle, going 22-60, missing the playoffs again. Now in the off seasons, the Warriors would resolve their issue with Carroll and he was back on the team. However, just as the Warriors solved their contract issues with Carroll, Purvis Short got involved into a contract dispute after his crazy year he just had and held out for a couple of weeks, but the Warriors would eventually manage to come to a contract agreement with him. Now in the off season as well, the Warriors would make a huge draft selection in the draft, taking Chris Mullin, eventually becoming the face of the franchise, but for now it was still Purvis Short's team. Now Short would go on to be the 5th leading scorer in the NBA this year, averaging 25.5 points to go along with 3.7 assists and 5.1 rebounds in 64 games because of him holding out. Yet again missing the All-Star game in large part due to him missing the early season with the contract dispute. Now missing Short to start the season would only continue the struggle for the Warriors, seeing them go 30-52, missing the playoffs. In the offseason, the Warriors would make a coaching change which brought in George Karl, who would help improve the team's play alongside Mullin stepping up this year a little more. However, Short would miss a fair amount of time this year with 2 separate injuries, with a knee surgery that was had and pulling his thigh muscle. Now, Purvis Short would only play in 34 games this season, where he would average 18.3 points, 2.5 assists, and 4 rebounds a night. But despite Short missing time with the Warriors, they were looking better like a rejuvenated team, going 42-40, making the playoffs for the first time in Purvis Short's career, getting a 5 seed. And Purvis would be healthy and ready to play in the playoffs, where in round 1 they would get the Utah Jazz. Now the Jazz were led by Karl Malone, Mark Eaton, and Daryl Griffith, Thurl Bailey, and John Stockton, where they would help the Jazz take over in the first 2 games in the best-of-5 series, before some big performances from Sleepy Floyd and Purvis Short would help turn the series right around, and they would rattle off 3 straight wins, shocking everyone, becoming the second team in NBA history to come back from down 2-0 in a best-of-5 series. Now in round 2, the Warriors would get a matchup with the Los Angeles Lakers, led by Magic Johnson, James Worthy, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Now this series would end up being rather lopsided though, with the Warriors lacking the talent and the playoff experience to match up with the Lakers, advancing via a gentleman's sweep, with the Lakers going on to win the NBA title this year. In Purvis Short's first playoff experience, he would find himself playing the 6-man role most of the time while averaging 14.6 points, 3.3 rebounds, and 2.7 assists. However, the Warriors had a decent season this year with Purvis Short missing significant time and him coming off the bench most of the time in the playoffs. Henceforth, the Warriors decided to trade him in the offseason to the Houston Rockets for Dave Feitel and a 1989 first-round draft pick that would go on to beat Dana Barros in the offseason. Now Short would be joining a Houston Rockets team who were led by Hakeem Olajuwon and Ralph Sampson. However, shortly into that season, Ralph Sampson was butting heads with head coach Bill Fitch and would eventually get traded as a result with Steve Harris to the Golden State Warriors for Joe Barry Carroll and Sleepy Floyd in cash, helping reunite the Warriors trio, but in Houston. After all the moves, Purvis Short would find himself coming off the bench most of this season, where he would go on to average 14.3 points, 2.7 rebounds, and 2 assists, helping see the Rockets go 46-36, making the playoffs as a 6th seed, where they would run into the Dallas Mavericks round 1, led by Rolando Blackman, Derek Harper, and Mark Aguirre. Now Hakeem would do everything you can imagine and ask for a player in this series, but it still wasn't enough, with the Mavericks winning 3-1, showing a glaring need for better supporting cast around Hakeem. Purvis Short over this playoff series would go on to average 5.5 points and 2.3 rebounds. Now the Houston Rockets would look completely different next year with 2 separate big trades, which involved Joe Barry Carroll leaving the team and a separate one with Otis Thorpe arriving in Houston in hopes of changing the playoff outcome of the year prior. Now this season would see Purvis Short take on a smaller role as he was aging, playing the least amount of minutes in his entire career. As a result, he would only average 7.4 points, 2.8 rebounds, and 1.6 assists a night, on a Rockets team with a very similar record of the year prior, going 45-37, getting a 5 seed in a matchup against the Seattle Supersonics. Now the Sonics were led by Dale Ellis and Xavier McDaniel. However, similar to the prior year, Hakeem would play great, but not a lot of support from teammates, and on top of that, Ellis would be getting hot in key moments, seeing the Rockets lose the series 1-3. In this series, Purvis Short would average 4.8 points and 2.3 rebounds. Now in the offseason, Purvis Short was a free agent and would end up signing a deal to join the New Jersey Nets for a year. He would be joining a struggling Nets team though, however, led by Sam Bowie, when he was healthy that is. Now Short would find himself back in a 6-man role while starting occasionally for the Nets, seeing himself average 13.1 points, 3 rebounds, and 1.8 assists. However, this was on the worst team in the league with the worst record, and the Nets would only go 17-65 this season. Now after this season, Short could not get a new deal and would decide to retire. After spending a year off of basketball completely, retired, quote unquote, he would return to play, but this time in Israel for Hapoel Tel Aviv, where Purvis Short would lead the team, helping them get to the finals, which unfortunately they would lose in. Now after this season, Purvis Short would officially hang up the shoes and retire from playing basketball. Over his 12-year NBA career, he would average 17.3 points, 4.3 rebounds, and 2.5 assists a night. After his playing days, he would continue to stick around the game of basketball, where Purvis Short would go on to take a job with the NBA Players Association Department of Players Programs, where he would later find himself being named the director of the entire program in 1999, helping many young players in the NBA find their way. Purvis Short will often be remembered as the player who led the Warriors and bridged the gap for the franchise from Rick Barry to Chris Mullins eras, all the while putting up some phenomenal seasons, yet still not getting an all-star appearance to his name, in large part due to team struggles. But despite his team struggles, Purvis Short helped give fans a show with his high-arching shot and ability to score at will with his jumper, being forever remembered as a Golden State Warrior great. Thanks for watching this video on Purvis Short's career. Now if you want to see any videos in the future about any random players, leave it in the comments below and I may decide to do a video on them, who knows. Thanks again for watching. This has been Skid Denver.